So maybe before we start, is there anything in particular you would like me to focus on, or I presume we're going to have a Q&A here too, right?
Yeah, I have a series of questions, but I don't know. We'll wait for like 2 more minutes till 10 o'clock.
Okay.
And then do you have some opening comments you want to make?
Yeah, well, maybe let's do this. I'll just very brief, because it sounds like that's great. You have questions. So maybe I'll just introduce myself and start from there, because I no sense me going down a rabbit hole and then you have a lot of questions that don't get answered. So.
Well, a question that isn't in my questions, but I was just thinking in your introduction, why don't you tell us a little about your background before you got involved in city politics?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I'm older, so I have I'll try and keep it short. It's a long story, right? No.
Well, why don't you start now with that?
Oh, okay. Are we starting? Okay, very good. Well, it's so good to see you all, League of Women's Voters. My name is Joe Deets. I'm a city council member, and for this year, I am the mayor for the city of Bainbridge Island. Now, what is that? We do have a city manager form of government, but state law apparently requires us to have a mayor as well. So we select the mayor, we being the city council, amongst ourselves. It's sort of our own little vote. And one of us takes this position for 1 year. And now I guess I could always reapply next year, but I'm not thinking of that. I'm just doing this work now. So what is that? What does the mayor do? Same thing as a city council member. It's just I take on more duties, mostly in terms of outreach. I've spoken with the Bainbridge Island Republicans Women's Luncheon Club, was that last week, the Island Volunteer Caregivers, I think the week before, and of course, yourselves. So my job, as I see it, is to be available, to meet with you and talk about any issue relating to the city that is important to you. So this is a wonderful opportunity, and I wish we were doing it in person, but I guess, see, the governor's mandate is relaxed March 21st, I think, the indoor mask mandate. So, but that's not yet. So I am here for you and looking forward to your questions.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt for a minute. Lydia, for some reason, your picture is very awkward because it's so bright. I don't know if you can move a little bit. Or...
oh, yes, thank you. Sorry. Sunny day, hard to believe. Okay.
That's much better.
No, we're not used to sun around here, are we?
Okay, I welcome all of you. And Joe, as he was just saying, is our mayor for 2022 for the city of Bainbridge Island. And thank you for joining us, Joe. First of all, why don't you tell us a little about yourself and your background?
Oh, sure. Well, let me see. I've been on Bainbridge since 2000, so 22 years, which happens to be the longest I've lived anywhere. I was born in California. My dad, which is still a mystery to us in the family, decided to move us all to a remote farm in Montana in the 60s. So I lived on a farm for many years, a small farm. And I still know more about raising chickens and feeding cows and cleaning barns than I care to admit. So we still have the farm, but my dad still lives there. He's 94. Mom is gone, but he lives alone with his cat, albeit my sister lives next door to keep a close eye on him. So I talk to my dad almost every day. And then, so I grew up in Montana, I could say, and then went to the University of Montana. And when I graduated, I was part of Montana's biggest export, its youth, and I moved to Seattle. And then my background was in finance. I worked for Merrill Lynch for many years in Seattle, and then my now wife, but then boyfriend, girlfriend, we met in school. I was getting an MBA at Seattle University. I met my wife, and we moved to Hong Kong in 1989. And we lived in Hong Kong throughout the 90s, left in 2000. But while I was in Hong Kong, I worked for the government of Hong Kong as a securities regulator. So it's financial securities. And so saw our share of crises and issues there. And of course, including the handover from the British colony to to China. So I like to tell the story that there was Friday. I ended my work. I was working for the colonial government of Hong Kong, took a long weekend off, came back. My desk is still there. My work is still there, but I'm working for the special administration region of China. So in some ways, nothing changed. In other ways, everything changed. So that was in 1997. And then in 2000, we decided to come back to the US. And we love Seattle. This is where we met. But we were sort of done with cities. And so we literally kind of looked at the map and go, yeah, we want to be close to cities, but not in the city. And, Bainbridge just looks awfully convenient. So we settled here. And then in 2005, we were blessed to have a daughter. And I'm an older dad, and Hannah, my daughter, is now a sophomore at Bainbridge Island High School. And so it's just wonderful to be here. I love Bainbridge Island. Now, in terms of my political, how did I get to be on city council? I guess maybe that would be a question you would have is, let me just say the 2016 election, the presidential election, was quite upsetting. And I decided to run for, what can I do? And it was literally my wife says, well, you've been talking about running for council, why don't you do it? So I ran for office in 2017, was elected, say 65% of the vote, and assumed office in 2018. So I finished my 4-year term. I ran for re-election last year, as I'm sure you know, because you had me up with your candidate forums. And of course, I was re-elected this time, 71% of the vote. Not that anyone's keeping track. and I'm signed on for another a second term. So I would say I love the work. It's stressful. It's but I honestly believe that there's something to be said for experience. I feel like I'm a much better council member now than I was 4 years ago. So, and apparently maybe my colleagues agreed and said, well, you can be mayor for a year. So love to be here. We have a great group. I like to think of council members as sort of a class. We have a new class. We have new members coming. And I think the dynamics is very good on our current council, and we're getting a lot of good stuff done. Last night, I could talk about last night's meeting, for example. So very excited about the direction we're going. I love our new city manager, Blair King. And so anyway, I'm just thrilled to be here.
Good, thank you. Well, what are your top priorities as mayor for 2022?
Well, it's not just me. Just so you know, I'm one of 7. So I could say I represent all of us in that respect. So my priorities are all of our priorities. So we actually, I'm just looking at my little cheat sheet here. We have council priorities. So this was something we put together last year for 2021, 2022. And priorities are, let me just say, it's very, very important because it's so easy to get I'll just say distracted, sidelined, constituents come, you got to stop everything you're doing and work on this thing. And then things don't get done because there's capacity issues. We only have so much staff. We only have so much money. So it's very, very important. It's a discipline that council works with our city manager. Let's stay focused on. It's like talking with your teenagers. Stay focused on the task at hand. Well, that applies to us. So among our top priority, and this is agreed by all of us on the council, is our climate action implementation. What that is we approved a climate action plan in December 2020, which is a very ambitious plan to reduce our carbon emissions on the island, not just the city, but the whole island, and make us more resilient to in the face of the changing climate. So it's not just reducing greenhouse gases, is how do we adapt to sea level rise? How do we adapt to wildfire risk? How do we adapt to an unstable electrical grid, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a very comprehensive roadmap. And how do we reduce our waste? So something we discussed last night. So climate action implementation, that's job number one. And then our Winslow master plan update. So what is that? We have thing about being on council, working with the city, is it's all about planning, having rules in place as to where to, and principally, so much of our work is relating to land use. Let me just say that. Probably vast majority of everything I do has something to do with land use. So the Winslow master plan. So Winslow. Winslow is our core center on the island. This is where it is agreed under our comprehensive plan, under the Growth Management Act, under our countywide planning policy, et cetera. Winslow is where the growth should go. Why? Because that's where the ferry terminal is. That's where the businesses are. That's where the schools are. That's where transportation networks are. It's in Winslow. So we don't create the growth. Of course, what we do is we put in structures allowing for the growth to occur there as opposed to somewhere else. Like I live in the north end of the island, Sunrise Drive. We prefer not to see the growth in our more rural areas, but in Winslow. So the Winslow master plan, we have a master plan already. It's just, we're going to update it. So that is going to be a 1 to 2 year effort to look at how do we accommodate future growth on the island, and again, focusing on Winslow. So climate, Winslow master plan, and then our housing action plan, housing needs assessment, housing inventory. I don't need to tell you, ladies, that we are in a housing crisis on Bainbridge as well as everywhere across the country. Here, the county, the state, the country, it is a severe housing crisis. I understand we are expected to get about 1.5 million more people in the next 20 years that we, in our region, Western Washington, and we're part of the Puget Sound Regional Council, and they allocate literally numbers per county of people that we need to plan for. I don't remember offhand what the numbers are for Kitsap, but we're given, each county's given, here's so many people you need to plan. It's not like when we say planning for zoning, planning for infrastructure. And so we're right in that process right now. So, but a lot of this has to do, so then housing, I guess I diverge a little bit, but we are looking at how do we provide housing for our workers on the island? If you talk to any business person, almost all of them, virtually all of them will say, we have a hard time getting workers because they don't live on the island. They live maybe in Port Orchard or someplace like that, which makes it very, very difficult to keep workers. So housing is a third priority. We're undertaking a groundwater management plan. There's really no work for me to do on that. We've already budgeted for that. We've already hired a hydrogeologist. We've given her our marching orders. It's just because Bainbridge Island is a sole source aquifer, we don't have streams coming into us where everything is from aquifers for our water. So we're going to do an intense study on our water capacity. Wastewater treatment plant upgrades. You probably know we've had some sewage spills at the Winslow wastewater treatment plant. We are putting a lot of money and effort into upgrading that. and some other things. So that's a lot. And one thing is all this stuff takes time and effort and focus. It's a sort of it's a collaborative effort between council, city manager, and staff. And I'm really excited this year that we've made some really good, I think, decisions for the way forward on pretty much all these things.
Okay, Lydia has a question, which do you want to ask it, Lydia, or do you want me to read it? Okay, Lydia's question is, last year's heat dome was very frightening. Are there specific plans in place or underway to deal with possible fires and other emergencies that could result from another such event?
Great. Yeah, heat dome was horrific, wasn't it?
Yes.
And wonder why that happened. All right. By the way, I didn't mention my background. I also spent 15 years in the solar industry. So finance, solar. So it give you sort of a reflection of kind of where I'm coming from on that. So yes, the heat dome, we are looking at our forest management practices because we are still a very heavily forested community, thank God. But that's obviously a risk. And the fires that you're seeing in California, frankly, is a matter of time before we start experiencing those same. So one of the things that we are doing, so there's forest management practices, but also, in the event of a disaster, and a disaster could be fire, it could be an earthquake, what have you. We've had the pandemic, of course, that's a different kind of disaster. But one thing that Bainbridge Island has excelled in is in its disaster preparedness. We invested in resilience quite a few years ago. I think we're one of the very few small jurisdictions that actually has an emergency management coordinator and the SAGE. And it's really paid off dividends. If you ask, why is our COVID vaccination rate so high? Well, it says something about this community, but it also says something about our organization as a city, that we deliberately put in resources to create an infrastructure for disaster preparedness. Now, one was hiring Anne, but also dedicating money. So, for example, we have what's called a Wilderness First Responder program, where any citizen can take this course in Wilderness First Responder, which is sort of emergency first aid. That's 0 to 24 hours. Something happens, and it was decided that we only have so many doctors, so many paramedics on the island, and when something happens, we're going to be short of medical care. So they have this program to give some training to citizens and to help out. So why I mention this is I happen to be one. And I think I'm the only council member who has done the program. In fact, I'm getting recertified this weekend. So doing that, but in respect to wildfires or any risk, we've set up what we call emergency hubs on the island, about at least a half a dozen. And what are these? It's interspersed across the island, that in an event of a disaster happening, if you cannot stay in your home, there's a place you can go for food, water, shelter. So I'm just saying, so there's reducing the risk with the wildfire, with the forest management, but then there's also adaptation. When, I hate to say, should something happen, we have a means to do that. And let me just also add, I happen to be the chair of the Kitsap Emergency Management Council. So we coordinate not just with Bainbridge, but with the whole county. And so, in fact, last week, I took part in a what's called the tabletop exercise, where you sit together and you have, quote, a disaster, something happened. And in this case, it was a large earthquake down in Port Orchard area. So then what do you do? How do you marshal your assets? Who do you contact first? All those things. So I'm just saying, disaster preparedness is a very real thing that we do. We spend resources, and yeah. So hopefully that answers your question.
Okay. Are there other questions? Yeah, Maury.
Isn't there a I don't know whether the Ann Sage, I believe, if she set this up, isn't there sort of a backup private marine fleet, you might say, in case the bridge fails? Maybe you can speak to that.
I don't know too much about this. I actually learned this during our tabletop exercise. We have a flotilla. Yes. That there's a lot of boat owners on the island. I need to ask a little bit more about this, but you're right. Should an event happen, we could lose our ferry, the dock could be damaged, the bridge could be damaged, and what do we do? So there's sort of in fact, I learned across Kitsap County, there's people who have horses. So there's a network of people who can use the horses. Suddenly become really important in when the roads are down and stuff. So yes, a flotilla, and it's not just Bainbridge, it's the county-wide. So we very much coordinate with across all jurisdictions. So I just want to be clear about that. But Bainbridge actually shines on this. We've during COVID, we took volunteers from Bainbridge were going across Kitsap County, doing vaccinations, doing COVID testing, and even outside the county. We even had a clinic in Jefferson County. So for a small jurisdiction, we really punched above our weight. But the main thing is we are not alone. We work with our other jurisdictions. We work with the Coast Guard. So yeah.
How much of that was the city and how much was Bainbridge Prepares, or how do you interact?
We interact a lot. I know like they coordinate the Wilderness First Responder course, and the city subsidizes that course. Like folks like me, half the cost is paid for by the city if you take this course. By the way, it's a fairly intense course. And so it's, so the city's, I think, budgeted $10,000 to subsidize that. But yeah, we work closely with them. There's like you have Endless Age, and then you have Lauren Bass at Bainbridge Prepares. I mean, it just works hand in glove. Like I see when we go to a vaccination clinic, which I'm sure you've all been to, you'll see Ann there, you'll see Lauren there. It's the fire district, of course, fire department is there. We all work together.
Carolyn, you have a question.
Yes, good morning. I wanted to go back just briefly and mention, I think with the flotilla, I think the harbor master is the one that coordinates that. I don't know much. I just remember that bit in the paper at some point.
That would be right. That would be Tammy Allen, and she's just wonderful. She's actually quite involved with derelict vessels, which is not really a disaster. Well, it's a different kind of disaster, which, by the way, Bainbridge excels on derelict vessel removal. I didn't know this. I didn't realize we were so good at it till I talked to other jurisdictions that are like Port Orchard. They're just inundated with sunken vessels all over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's a real, very real problem. But yeah, Tammy Allen. So again, hiring good people and giving them the support. I've never heard that before, right? So we have some excellent people in our organization. Tammy Allen, Ann Lesage, so much our staff at the city is phenomenal. Blair is great too.
So is it okay to ask a different question?
Sure, of course.
Okay. So but at the Winslow master plan, you said there's going to be an interim plan that's done. And I was wondering two things. One was how public input's going to be sought. And the other is, I remember the discussions about the hotel downtown. And then at some point the council decided to put together some sort of law temporarily or permanent, I don't know, that said, no, you can only build a hotel on High School Road, which means there was something to that effect that was used as sort of a workaround to avoid the hotel being built in Winslow.
Okay, so let's see. Sounds like two questions. One is, so the Winslow, we have a Winslow master plan now, and it was, I think, done last in 2006. So long time ago, needs to be updated. So that all I can say is we've started on that process. So that's a work with us, council, working with staff, and of course, what is our housing needs? So again, we need to do a housing needs assessment. And again, the intent here, the intent mine that I see it, and I think there should be broad agreement on council, is focus the growth, whatever growth we have is on Winslow. Now, we don't create growth. I mean, we're not developed. It doesn't work that way. I mean, it's like, I don't create things happening. It's like someone would have to say, oh, you have this zoning, and then I can build this thing here. So we create the regulations. And let me just say, we can't just stop people from doing things. You know, for the most part, I can't say stop, you know. Can you imagine if you own some land, you can't have the city council say, no, I'm sorry, you can never, ever do anything with that land. I don't have that right. I mean, if we tried to do that, we would lose very bad in court. So, but you can regulate the growth. You can regulate the zone, create the zoning, create the land use rules. So we regulate it, but I can't like mandate, you know, there shall be a development here and not here. That is not my decision. And let me just say, when you see developments that you don't like, as I do, and I can certainly think of some, I look at those as personal failures. And I could say, the thing about land use, if you see a development go up, that project was done by old regulations. Like, let me just say, hope I'm not touching on anyone's toes or stepping on anyone's toes. So there's a development on Madison that I think is butt ugly, but the rules that it was approved through predated me. And so I get blamed for, well, you know, Joe, why did this happen? Well, I had nothing to do with it. It was before I was on council that project was approved. So let's see, talking about the Winslow Hotel.
So yeah, as I recall, the way that it all ended up happening was, I just watched it and saw, after all these years of investment and sort of the council, and there were members changing over time, that seemed like that the process didn't go very smoothly, I guess I would say. And I thought I had read something about at some point the council deciding that hotels would be up on High School Road, and that was this sort of workaround to prevent, you know, what had been developed over years in Winslow.
Okay. I don't know about the High School Road. That's news to me. But okay. So I'll try and answer, but I have to sort of be a little careful where I'm expressing my opinion, and then there's the consensus of council. So maybe the easiest way, I'll just start with my opinion. Do we need a hotel in Winslow? Yes. Okay. We do. That's how's that? Now there's this project on Winslow Way West that an application was made. They followed all the rules, and then a majority of council decided that that would be denied, and that was not my vote. I didn't vote in favor of that. I voted in favor of, let's examine how hotels can be can fit in Winslow and how it, in accordance with our comprehensive plan. But just to say no hotels, no, that wasn't my position. And it was frankly unclear what the position really was amongst some of my colleagues. But so where it is we asked the Planning Commission, can hotels be come to fit in Winslow, and does that work under the comprehensive plan? And the funny answer was yes. They kind of almost like, yes, hotels work in Winslow, which I could have said that as well. So we're kind of at there's some things I guess I can't quite talk about due to some confidentiality, but let me just say there are discussions ongoing relating to that site and relating, talk with the developer. So, I think you could readily expect something to happen there, but I can't talk about what that would be. But there's no prohibition of hotels in Winslow. And, just think as a practical matter, again, ask ourselves, do we need a hotel in Winslow? And I would say, yes, we do. I mean, I'm sorry, we just do. We just can't keep saying no to things. The world is constantly changing, and there's good ways of doing things, and there's not so good ways of doing things. So we want to make sure that whatever has happened, that the decision I'm making will look good 20, 30 years down the road. And that's tough. That's tough. But, so I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but I know I'm getting a little vague because let's just say we're working on it, but we're not quite prepared to, there's confidentiality things, and I could get in trouble if I say anything. So.
And is there public input then that will be plotted into the new master plan?
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, trust me, everything we do is required for public input. When I talk about things I can't talk about, there's some, could be, threat of litigation or the things that are actually it is okay for me to be quiet about is litigation matters, and say if we're buying or selling property. So things that, obviously people would say, well, you don't talk about that in public. So outside of that, it is a thoroughly public process. And one thing, we are very focused on being open to what we do. I'll give you an example. It has nothing to do with the hotel. Last night, we had before us on the agenda to approve 2 new members of the Planning Commission. Okay, I was part of the interview panel, being mayor, and we had a recommendation for 2 new Planning Commission members. So usually a fairly straightforward process. However, in the agenda packet that goes out to council and goes out to the public, the information was only on the 2 that we were approving. It did not have all 11 candidates, and I pulled that off the agenda for discussion last night because, as a matter of public process, so people know what was the pool of applicants, that was not provided publicly. It was just, I'll just say it was a mistake. We should have had that. We've done that in the past, but for whatever reason, all the pool of candidates was not provided publicly. So I bring that up that is a transparency issue. That so we say, look, we're not hiding anything, okay? So here's all the people that we applied, who applied, and here's the people we selected. It's all public. So trust me, there will be a very public process, and we follow that process. We follow the law, and I spend a lot of my time listening to constituents. When I ran for re-election, I knocked on about 1,000 houses talking with people. It was not just getting reelected, but it was really valuable for me to hear what's on people's minds, because I represent you. The actions I take, I think, are a reflection of what the public wants me to do, what the people want me to do. Now, I have my views, and of course, you see that in my, when I was running for office, and I run on a platform, I get elected, then I feel people expect me to carry that out.
I want to go back to the emergency preparedness, and you mentioned a forestry plan or forest management plan. Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I think I'd say this would need to be done in conjunction with our fire department, but I think we have. I don't see anything on the agenda coming up to go into this, but I do believe we absolutely do need to just look at this. That we cannot let our forests just accumulate debris. Let's say debris and fire risks. So I think we need to start thinking about how do we better manage our forests. Now, we haven't discussed this, and there's no, obviously, thus no decision has been made. I don't even see it quite on our agenda schedule. But the point being is, is the climate changing? Yes, it is. Does this impose an increased fire risk? Yes, it is. Should we do something about it? Yes, we should. So I am no forestry expert, but in what I do in my work is I listen to the folks who know a lot more about a particular topic than I do. And I will see. So how can we better manage our forests to reduce the risk? I'm not saying we clear cut our grand forests. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying we have to, the risk is real, and it's simply going to get worse. So I don't have an answer for you, Delight. It's not like we have a plan that, we're going to start clearing our forests. No, that doesn't exist. But I'm saying it's on our radar, and it's part of our climate action plan. And it's something we would work with the fire district, because this is part of their expertise too. I do know we did. For people who live, in a forested area, we are allowing them to clear around their home a certain perimeter and not have to deal with city bureaucracy, let's just say permitting, because we want to, we're not saying they have to do this. We're saying we won't get in your way if you want to do that, because we recognize the risk.
Kat has said she thought there was a policy that commercial chains could only be on High School Road. Is that in fact in place at this point? And what's happened with commercial chains? I remember the big issue that after McDonald's came, we weren't supposed to have any more, but then they said, oh, but there's a commercial chain inside of Starbucks, inside Safeway, and so on.
Yeah, that's a great question. We are not a big box community, are we? We're not. And I'm not aware of there being a law against that. And I don't think if we did, it would not be enforceable. How could we say no because you're a big box store? But suffice to say, we do not have, we don't have Home Depot, we don't have Walmart, we don't have Lowe's, which then causes folks like me who have a housing remodel project to go off island to, I go to a Home Depot an awful lot. I try and do business locally, but there's just, that's the price we pay. So I think your question, do we have rules against big box change? Not that I'm aware of. We do have Safeway, we do have Rite Aid, we do have McDonald's, and Starbucks, of course. I think if you were a big developer or a big box chain, you would look at Bainbridge and go, maybe this isn't such a great site. Land costs are much higher. So let's just say from a housing perspective, for a growth perspective, there are literally thousands of building permits pending in Port Orchard and Bremerton and Poulsbo and across the county, but not here on Bainbridge. When people talk about, is there too much growth on Bainbridge? I like to think, not that I'm not quote pro-growth, but let's get real. If you want to see where the growth is happening, it's off the island. And that's a fact.
Is that good or bad?
Well, that's a question. Indeed. So let's look at the pros and cons. Is this a black and white issue? Pros, we have continued. We thankfully have continued our rural nature, the things I love about Bainbridge. On the other hand, who can live here? Or maybe more appropriately, who can move here? You ask me that, I'll ask you, who do you think can actually move here now? Do you think a schools teacher can move here? Do you think a police officer can move here? No. Is that what we want? I don't think so. So there's prices to pay for decisions we've made. On the other hand, I think we're in a good position that we've so much of our community is whole in our land use that we can be very strategic now in how we allow for growth to happen. Like again, in Winslow, affordable housing. And let me just add, I'm on a lot of regional committees. I talk with the mayors of Port Orchard, Bremerton, and Poulsbo. They are under enormous stress. I hear this every time I meet with them with their growth. And it's just trying to keep up with the infrastructure. They can't. I heard Mayor Wheeler from Bremerton say the other day, the only thing they can do now is grow up, literally in height. So there is tremendous pressure in Kitsap County, on Kitsap County. This is a desirable place to live. And we're under, I'll just say, the pressure is real, and it's actually coming from the state too. There was a bill, 1782, House bill to allow for increased density if you're in a transit area. And it's a little, I thought this did not pass, get out of the House, but then I saw some activity yesterday, which I was surprised. So I'm saying there's a lot of pressure on us, jurisdictions, and some of it's just demographics, and this is real. And so you could say, what do you do about it? And this is something I sweat bullets as a council member, and I about this, and I know, like again, the other jurisdictions, everyone's feeling very, very stressed about this. Yes.
Maury, you're muted. Maury.
I came to Bainbridge in 2011 or 2012, I think. And it was shortly after that, if not right during that time, when Bainbridge was updating their comprehensive plan. And there was a lot of community input sessions and all of that. And theoretically, then the zoning that is implemented needs to be in alignment with the comprehensive plan. And some say that's way off because the plan gets in place and it's a 10-year process, cycle, I believe. And then you get new council members and you get new zones in there. So there are zoning rules that go against or that are not in alignment with the comprehensive plan. And I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about the bill that you just mentioned. I guess you said it's 1782. Where I believe there is concern that, this would just, all the work that we put in this comprehensive plan and all of our zoning would go out the window. That's what I've heard say. And so I'm wondering if you can speak with in a little more detail about this bill and the concerns the city council or the city should have about it or not. I want to say or not, but it's
I have a question along with that, or a comment. I've been protesting that bill, and so I got an email from Tara Simmons yesterday saying you'll be glad to know that it's not gone out of the House. So I was surprised at your comment. That was from yesterday.
Yeah, well, good. Maybe I should check with Tara. So let me just say I'm opposed to that bill. But it's not just me; it's council in total. But then it's not just the City Council of Bainbridge Island. Port Orchard, Bremerton, Poulsbo, the mayors have all come out against it. Again, going to these regional committees, meetings, everyone's just aghast with this. And because land use is very complex, there takes a lot of nuance, it takes a lot of skill, and you can still get it wrong. But you need someone, the local jurisdictions, to know the area, who have the connection, talk with their constituents. It's like, what can we be done? And this 1782 was this totally blunt instrument across the board. So you don't care where you are. And like, for example, they say if you're in a transit, if there's a transit location, if there's buses hitting every 15 minutes, suddenly that falls under the legislation, then that allows within a half-mile radius of increased density. What does that do? That de-incentivizes transit. Suddenly, when we start looking at, I'm on the board of Kitsap Transit, and if we want to we want to get people to get out of their cars, take, obviously bicycles, but also mass transit. And that law would make it difficult for me to say, yes, I want 15-minute, no more than 15-minute wait times along 305 for people to catch the bus. If that law was in place, I would really be reticent to endorse that, which makes it really a bad decision. It's a bad law. It's a bad law. It was one size does not fit all. It does not. And so I fought vigorously against it. It does look like it didn't pass, but I'm signed on. Maybe some of you others, you can get notifications of bills. And I got a notice on this bill that I thought it was dead, and hopefully it is, that there was some second reading that took place yesterday. And I'm like, what? It did not get out of the House, and there was a deadline to get out of the House last week. So I'm unclear. I hope it didn't pass. I hope it's dead. But having said that, this is the pressure we're under as a jurisdiction, as a city, as a community. I would expect another bill would come forward again. So here's the thing. If we don't start taking action ourselves on how we're going to deal with our housing crisis, the state will. The state's going to make the decision for us. So, and I don't think we're going to like that.
Just to sum up that bill for some of you that don't know it, it would have allowed up to 4plexes on all properties on the island, thus destroying basically our comprehensive plan. And in my opinion, sadly, the governor was very much for it. And when I was communicating with Tara Simmons, she said, I have to support it because the governor is asking us to. So I think that's where we have to put our pressure. Nancy?
I'm totally against that bill as well, but I'd like to encourage us to focus attention on how we, because it might work for some other people in the state, okay? We don't know. We just know that it doesn't fit Bainbridge. So if we could focus our attention on figuring out a workaround, I think is one of the words, or an exemption, or a contingency plan, or in other words, a defense against it, so that that's where our energy is, so that if they're going to keep barraging us with this sort of thing, we have some policies, some proof, I'm very poor at the proper language, but some ammunition, essentially.
Yeah. Well, a lot of this is, thank you. And from my perspective, a lot of this is just communication. And when I say, one thing I've learned is just be out there. There's meeting with constituents, but there's also with our state representatives and our governor representatives. Last Friday, I met with the governor's representative for this region. She came and met with me in Blair. And one thing, we talked about this bill, and I said, when you start thinking about doing this again, please come and talk to us. I mean, this is not helpful from my. So then I have to spend time and energy fighting this bill, which that means that's time and energy I'm not doing something else. And let me just say, Senator Rolfes was very much against this. That's why the bill did not get out of the House of the Senate. It was due to her efforts. So a lot of this is, can we, governor's office, city, can we talk? Can you listen to us? And we could tell you what it is that, we think would work. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. I was never approached. I mean, we learned that this bill happened, when it was launched, and suddenly it was just all hands on deck to fight it. So anyway.
Okay. Kat, and then Carolyn, and then Maury. Kat, you have a question?
Yes. When that bill came out, I mean, Joe, you're absolutely correct. The state will continue to, the legislators will continue to come up with these bills to find solutions to the housing crisis. And so it is on each community to define their plan to address housing so that your police officers, your teachers can live in the communities where they work. A lot of people rejected that bill the minute they saw it without even reading it. There were a lot of changes that were made to it from the beginning.
they did adjust some of the housing. So it's not really accurate to say every lot will be zoned this way, because they did go back and modify it. I just think that too often, as soon as we hear about something, you know, the wagons start to circle. And so you know, watching Sammamish, for example, they're challenging the Growth Management Act. It's costing them millions of dollars each year, and they've lost every challenge. So, you know, I think that communities can't keep saying no. And, you know, it's not, and honestly, when I looked at it, I think back to my childhood, when you can go into older communities and it wasn't unusual to see a duplex or a triplex, not so often to see, you know, fourplexes, but housing was designed for different economic needs to meet the, you know, the needs of the community. If you have a senior who wants to downsize, there has to be housing that allows them to do that. And people say, well, their home is worth $1 million, so they can just move into a condo. Well, our condos are $1.5 million with the homeowner due. So there has to be housing that addresses everyone's needs. It can't just be for a few. And honestly, if there's a 6,000 square foot home on the lot next to me versus, you know, a triplex, what's the difference in my life? There's going to be as many cars. You can look at any upscale home with the teenagers, everybody's got their cars. And so, you know, are we reacting in an emotional way rather than in a factual, data-driven way? And I think data should drive most of our decisions.
Great comments. Now, do you think people are rational?
No, not when it comes to housing, land use, or trees.
Or pretty much anything. I mean, I mean, we have this fallacy. I'm a little off topic, that we like to think we're rational beings, but we're not. We're emotional.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. But good. I appreciate your comments.
Carolyn, I just wanted to, if I can real quickly, there is a book that our league is reading, and we're going to have a guest speaker on it, and it's Missing Middle Housing: Thinking Big and Building Small to Respond to Today's Housing Crisis. And this book was highly recommended by our commissioner, Charlotte Garrido. And she is partnering with us to invite the author of this book to be the speaker at our annual meeting, you know, the keynote speaker. So I think this addresses what sort of we're talking about here. So I just wanted
that's great.
Put a plug in for that. It's again, it's called Missing Middle Housing: Thinking Big and Building Small to Respond to Today's Housing Crisis by Daniel Parolek, Parolek.
And
hey,
I guess
I'll very quickly, since we're talking books, Congressman Kilmer, it's really interesting. He calls me fairly regularly, which I'm always amazed at. I'm just a council member, and he calls me, Joe, how you doing? Which I'll just say I really appreciate. So I was talking to him about sort of dynamics and conflict that, you know, we face, and of course he does. And he said, Joe, I don't usually do this, but I'm going to recommend a book for you. It's called High Conflict by I think it's Amanda Ripley, High Conflict. And so I would recommend League of Women Voters to read this as well. I got it at the library and I just finished reading it. So because so much of what I do, frankly, is about conflict of one sort or another. And there's good conflict and there's what we call high conflict. So I'll leave it at that. I recommend the book. I got a lot out of it because I deal with conflict every single day.
I'll piggyback on that because Representative Kilmer's Modernization Committee had her come and speak because they've got polarizing voices in their committee. And I happened to catch part of that meeting and it was really fascinating. The one takeaway I recall was they suggested having a meal together. And I thought, well, you know, but anyway, yeah, so I think it's a really worthwhile book. But getting back to the affordable housing, and the commissioners, and there was an approval of the 1/10 of 1% tax, and then Bainbridge has also approved that. It's for affordable housing, as I understand it, or it can be for behavioral and mental health facilities. And this is just an open question. I don't know if it's worth considering that. I know we need the affordable housing desperately, but I also am looking at mental health in our county and on our island. And I don't know if that's something worth considering or not. I'm just throwing it out there.
Well, that's a good question. I don't, we did do our sales tax increase for affordable housing. I don't remember whether we did a carve out for the behavioral side as well.
I think it's only at the county level. I know there was something about
yeah,
when the commissioners approved it, I remember reading that that was something it could be spent on in addition to affordable housing.
Yeah. I don't remember, that's my memory. I don't remember that we had that for our sales tax increase, but yeah, we can go into behavioral health issues. Yeah, there's, you know, let's say our young people, you know, for example, there's, yeah, our problems are very broad. But yes, I think we need to, how do we take care of one another? You know, and mind you, I think we are a phenomenal community for doing so. You know, look what we did with COVID, our vaccination rates. It's just amazing.
And this could be another funding source for mental health facility if that's what we think we need on the island. I just hadn't thought of that funding source for that purpose because it was spoken about only for affordable housing. So anyway, thank you.
Sure. So I guess got a few minutes. Any burning questions you want to throw at me? Oh, you're muted, Dwight.
My dog was barking. How under the Growth Management Act is Bainbridge able to focus urban growth into Winslow rather than citywide?
It allows for that. And our countywide planning policies allows for that. So that's everything. I mean, I'm not sure. I'm a little surprised at the question. Everything, it only makes sense. You put the growth where there's the transit, where there's the businesses, where there's the schools. That's under the Growth Management Act. What's not under the Growth Management Act is climate mitigation or affordable housing. And let me just add, when it comes to population allocations and growth, the ability of us to increase our infrastructure lags behind. And I said, not just us, but all jurisdictions. You talk to Mayor Erickson in Poulsbo, and she says, my God, you know, we cannot keep up with our infrastructure needs with the growth that we have. So, I'm not sure I understand the question, Delight, because everything allows us to focus our growth in Winslow. The law.
Maybe that was her question.
Yeah, the law, our policies, what the community wants, what I want. There's no question of that. Having said that, if someone owns land on the north end of the island, I can't say, sorry, you can't build there. What we do is try and put structures in place to make it, you know, appealing to do, we want to put in place a transfer of development rights program. So, or TDR, transfer of development rights. What is that? I'll very quickly, that would say you own some forested land, you know, near me in the north end of the island. Rather than developing it, you can sell those development rights to someone that can use that in Winslow. So it's what we call density neutral. There's still going to be building, but it's going to be where we want it to go. So we really like that. We actually have a TDR program on Bainbridge. It's just never been used because it wasn't put together very well. So that is on our agenda, is to create an effective transfer of development rights program to, one, give people with land some money that otherwise, so they don't develop their lands, and then direct it to where we would like the growth to go.
Well, Joe, I want to thank you. This has been really interesting. Lots of good conversations, lots of points to think about. And thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you. This has been wonderful.
I want to say Christine Rolfes was with us in January, and she did talk about 1782, how much she opposed it. So that was very interesting. And for all of you, remember next month, our speaker will be the city manager. I'm really looking forward to hearing from him. However, because of his schedule, that meeting will be at 1 o'clock. So same day, Wednesday, fourth Wednesday, but 1 o'clock instead of 10 o'clock. So thank you all. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, ladies. It's been wonderful.
Bye.